Here we are.
Live. We're doing it. Hi, Internet.
So, are you ready? Or shall
Can we edit? Can we edit the video?
Yeah, we'll be able to edit the video. Should I start the music?
Or will our... Yeah.
Ready. Wait, I just remembered something.
Yes.
Gotta record the show. Alright, I'm gonna start that over again. There's too many buttons for me to be in charge of. Alright, here I go.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 39 of the podcast of Nonsensical Gamers. My name is Matt, and joining me live today are my two wonderful co-hosts, Miss Tiffany B.
Hello.
And Dan.
Ladies.
Whew, we are doing it, friends. How's everyone feeling?
Nervous.
Yeah. This is the pilot, the first live episode of the podcast of Nonsensical Gamers, broadcasted live on YouTube, and we are hoping that it is awesome. But since it is the first, be sure to tell us if anything goes wrong on your end out there in the internet. So, in case you don't know who we are, or you forgot, you can find us all over the internet by searching for us on Facebook at the League of Nonsensical Gamers, by shooting us an email at podcast@nonsensicalgamers.com, by finding us on the BGG Guild number 2077, or going to guild.nonsensicalgamers.com, or by chatting with us on places like Twitter and Instagram. And did you guys know that we have over 700 photos on our hashtag NonsensicalGamers Instagram tag? I think it's pretty cool. We have a really good show lined up for you today. We are going to chat about our gaming pet peeves, and then we are going to do our favorite segment, a little Keep, Trade, Burn. But before we get into any of that, let's chat a little bit about what we've been playing. So, Tiff, I'm going to kick it over to you, our resident sound technician. What have you gotten to the table recently?
I got to play Eeky.
I need to hear about
Eeky!
this.
That's what I was waiting for.
You don't say it right. You say it so blasé.
Well, that's how I talk, Dan. I'm sorry.
Put a little enthusiasm in there.
So this was a Kickstarter I backed. It came really super fast. I was really impressed with the turnaround time on it. And it is kind of a rondel game. I like to think of it if Mac Gertz made Lords of Waterdeep and sprinkled in a little Speicherstadt, that's what this game is. So.
And Dan has given up hope.
It's okay. Let me just explain it before you decide whether or not you hate it. Each round is a month of the year, and what you're going to be doing is you're going around this marketplace and making deals with different vendors to get money and Eeky points, which it all ties into this way of life thing in Japan back then. But the first thing you do is you go on this way of life track, and you get to pick in turn order how many spaces you're going to move. So it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. Depending on the number of players, it can be different. But and then you go around the marketplace, which is a giant rondel. And each space in the marketplace has a shop, and each shop can have up to 2 vendors in it. The players build the different vendors, so on your turn you have the choice to take money or build one of those vendors. So it's kind of like the buildings in Lords of Waterdeep. When you build one of them, you put your worker on it, and at certain points in the different rounds, you'll get a benefit depending on where your worker is. Every time someone uses your vendor, it moves up. Your worker moves up to a different place that gives you a better reward, and eventually they move off and they retire. So I don't know. It's got some really interesting things in it. It's tough to look at, just because. Yeah. Well, let me screen share, okay, so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the board. So, like, those little kind of yellow spaces in the middle are the little spots on the thing, but it's got all this great art. It's based on this Japanese mural, so it's really cool looking, but it's very easy to lose, where you're at, how many spaces you need to move. It's just hard to keep track of things. There are two different types of meeples. There's your giant meeple that's moving around the rondel, and then there are your worker meeples, and they look very similar. So it can be a little visually confusing. I like the look of it, but the other two people I was playing with did not. So, yeah, I think it's neat. I would play it again. It was simple to learn. It's Lords of Waterdeep-ish weight, maybe a little bit more complex because you also have fires that happen, so you have to plan for fires when they just are at a predetermined spot. And when that happens, you flip over a tile and it shows which shop is going to burn. And and if you don't have the right amount of like firefighter power, that fire spreads to the next shop and to the next shop and to the next shop until someone is able to put it out. So it can like burn down half of the shops on the board if no one's prepared for the fire. So that's interesting. We didn't have too much problem with that, but yeah.
Is that the Spiekerstadt element? Is that fire?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
Yeah.
Except in Spiekerstadt, it doesn't burn down all the stalls.
Right. Yeah, and you get the firepower in different places on the board, and there are different shopkeepers that give you that when you build them, or make them or hire them, I guess. But yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting.
All right, Dan.
It sounds great. Reading the rule book and watching videos, I did not get a Lords of Waterdeep vibe from it, but I guess I should play it first.
When I say Lords of Waterdeep, I just mean that the players are building the spots on the board that you can go to. So for your worker placement, the shops that you go to have an action, but then you also get to choose from the two vendors at that shop. So depending on what people have hired and put there.
Okay. That's cool.
Would you say that it's like the same weight as Lords of Waterdeep?
I'd say it's a little bit heavier than that.
I was going to say, it feels heavier.
Like
a little
medium?
bit. It's not terribly complicated. Like once you get going, it flows really easily.
Are you both happy that you didn't spend $400 on a hand-carved wooden box?
No, I still would have. That thing was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a collector standpoint, I think that would be okay. I think that would be just fine to have.
I would have bought that in a shop in Japan. Like, it's just that nice looking.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dan, this is on your top of the stack, right? So you still haven't gotten to play it, right?
Yep. I only brought 2 games down this weekend with me, and one of them is Eeky.
One of them is Eeky. Well, maybe we can get to play it, and maybe we can all finish our top of the stack for the first time ever.
That would be amazing.
It'd be a weird month. Well, Dan, what have you gotten to play?
I got to play a couple of new things, but the one I'll talk about has been on my list for a while, and that's Thebes. Thebes. Say how you want.
I would definitely call it Thebes.
Thebes.
Say with a lisp.
Yeah, this is a Queen Games game. It was out of print for a while, and then they re-kickstarted it, I think, at the end of like 2014. I was playing the German version, which doesn't matter because it's language independent. But this is a game about archaeology. So naturally, the reason this has been sought after by me was because it's a theme that I think my wife, the archaeologist, would get into. And another cheap ploy to maybe get some more games to the table at home. It had some really cool mechanics in it. The one major one being this time track. So everything you do in the game costs time, and as you kind of do these actions, you're advancing along this time track. Each unit of time is considered to be a week, and you're going to play X number of years. So there's 52 weeks in the year, so you have 52 action points to work with, and you can use them however you see fit. But the interesting part is you have to kind of time it so that you can efficiently kind of go about collecting and then digging and sort of things, because the mindset, at least at the initial outset of the game, is you're trying to collect these different bits of knowledge and these little assistants that are going to help you dig at some point during the year. And the way you do that is, the top half of the board is like all of Europe for the most part. So your major cities, London, Paris, Berlin, all those big boys. And then the bottom half is kind of where the dig sites are, and those are Mesopotamia, Egypt, like all of those kind of, typical Middle Eastern dig regions. And what you're going to do is, as you collect these books of knowledge, those are going to give you X pools from the individual bags of the individual sites. So there's 5 or 6 sites that you can dig at, and each one has its own bag with its own little chits in it and its own distribution of artifacts which are worth X points. So the more knowledge you collect in a certain site, the more you can pull from the bag, and then you can set collect and get more points that way. So again, it was a really interesting mechanism, because you're free to do whatever you want. You can move anywhere on the board, you can do whatever, but it's going to cost you time, and it's just balancing that time and all those other things. Then even at the dig sites, depending on your knowledge, you can spend 1 through 12 time, and your knowledge, there's this little spinning disc that lets you chart like how many pulls you can have. So you can spend anywhere from 1 to 12 weeks, but the more weeks you spend there, the more you're going to dig and pull from the bag, etc. So a really cool little game. I liked it a lot, actually. It was like 45 minutes to an hour. One of those games you can kind of play with the family, kind of, sit back and not have to be so intense about it. And, I like pulling from bags. I think it's a fun little mechanic. And again, I really like the time track.
Did your ploy work is the question.
Oh, this wasn't my game. This wasn't my game. I played this with some friends up by where I live. So I'm going to track one down. It's been on my want and trade list for a while now, so I'm going to happily keep it there, because I think it's a good one for her and me and the family.
So, quick question about that game, because I've looked at it before too, and I've seen people say that it's really like luck dependent based on what you're drawing out of that bag.
Oh yeah, but Tiff, I guess I should make this comparison because I think you would appreciate this. The bag drawing is basically New Bedford. I saw a huge amount of influence, because in each bag there's artifact tiles and then there's blank sand tiles, and as you pull the artifact tiles out, the sand tiles go back in, so each bag becomes more scarce as far as the things you can pull out of it. So you have to kind of, again, time it so that, okay, someone else is maybe collecting from the Egyptian site as well. I should probably get there first so I have a better chance at pulling out the bigger numbers than that person. So yes, it was random in that way, but again, the mitigation of building up your knowledge in those specific sites, and then again, pulling and when you pull, etc. Because you can only pull from each site once per year unless you have a special action that lets you redig. So, it wasn't the most strategic game. I'm not going to say that, but like I said, it was a lightweight, I'd say light to medium, kind of family-style game that I thought would go over really well with the audience's, like I said, casual family game.
Cool.
It's not something I would pull out with like Smee and Matt and like Ben, like the 4 of us. That's not something I'd probably pull out with us. But
do you think you could teach it to Mom?
Yeah, but note to self: Mom beat you at Mombasa.
Well, we'll get to that. That's on my list. Anyway, let me jump in here with a Pandemic Legacy mini update. I'm very excited because today is the day, friends. We are getting together. We're going to finish Pandemic Legacy today. We thought we were going to finish it last session. Turns out we're dumb. My biggest fear in Pandemic Legacy was that I would forget to, as kind of the leader of the game, forget to direct us to do something. We forgot to open a box, a very important box, and didn't notice it until we were packing the game up. So that was interesting. If you read our What We've Been Playing blog, you'll notice that it was more or less edited expletives because we all felt kind of dumb. So we were right on the brink of finishing up Pandemic Legacy, and I'm very excited to see how it ends. I just hope that we don't do anything else dumb. So I'll have a report for that next podcast. But the game that I want to chat about, I spoke a little bit about this with Tiff on last episode, but it was like before we recorded. And I don't think I've gotten to talk with Dan extensively about it. I need to talk about Grand Austria Hotel for a minute. I know you guys have already talked about it a little bit, but I finally got to play it. I played 2 games back-to-back. This is the Euro game about running a hotel. You're gathering, diplomats and fancy political figures to your hotel. You are feeding them strudel and coffee and wine and things like that. And then you are giving them a nice place to sleep. And my issue is that I really liked the game, but how does a game with this much downtime get made? I need to know, Dan, you're design-minded. Like, how do you package and sell this game knowing that it's got so much downtime?
I don't know. I've said it before, I'll never play this at 4-player. It's just entirely too long.
Yeah.
I know they've come out with an official kind of variant that lets you speed up the draft, and I think it alters it a little bit, but I would never play this with 4. 3 and 2. 2 I think goes really quick, especially if you got 2 people who know what they're doing. 3 it's a good clip. Again, sometimes depends on the people you're playing with. If you're playing with AP prone people, like, this can take forever. But if you're playing with people who are just kind of snap into their action, you only have 2 things to do, so it's
the
3-player
game we played,
so much changes. So
yeah,
I don't
think
it's that much downtime, but again, I will never play it at 4-player.
I think I know how they market it. It's a Euro game for a new generation of people that need to check their phone a lot.
Oh, jeez, that's awful. You're ruining me, Tiff.
It gives you plenty of time to check your email, your Twitter, your Facebook, your Snapchat. You can get all of your social media in on the downtime. It's perfect.
It's ridiculous. And you get an entirely new feed by the time your next turn rolls around. It's insane. We played a 3-player game with you. I played with you and Steve. It took a solid amount of time. And then we played a 4-player game the next day, and it took the same amount of time.
Yeah, again, it depends on who you're playing with. I think there's some AP-prone people that can just take their good old time with it, because there's a lot that... There's not a lot, but there's things that change from turn to turn, what dice are available, the people that are coming out, the customers, things like that. But again, not a lot changes, so... I know I have my turns where I'm caught between 2 things, but it's not that I haven't thought about those 2 things in the downtime. It's just I'm like, which one do I want to do? And I struggle with that. Yeah. But usually I'm pretty snappy with my moves.
Or the 1-6, though. I mean, things can change. Especially if... Yeah. Well, so all that aside, my other tiny thing about it is, why does the extra turn card exist? Why is there that one card in the whole deck of cards that does something completely different than any other card? Why does it have a whole extra turn? And I hate that card because Ben got it and Steve got it, and they both got it on a 4-5, so they both took 3 turns in a row. It was crazy. Yeah. I don't get why that card even exists. I don't see how it just doesn't fit the rest of the game.
Tiff, you want to jump in?
Oh, no. Well, it's not about the extra card. I was just going to say that I think enough changes in the game that if you are an AP player, it can be a problem. I consider myself someone who is highly AP prone, and that's exactly what happened to me in the game that we played at BGG Con, where I had a plan for what I wanted to do, and then things had changed so much by the time it got to me that I would like it hurt my brain to try to figure out a new way to do what I wanted to do. So if you have a bunch of AP people in your group, I wouldn't recommend it, and I love the game.
Yeah, I don't. The more I think about it, the less I like the drafting of the drafting mechanism, the snake draft, because that 1 to 8, the 2 to 7, those things that takes so long. And like Tiff said, like between 1 and 8, that's possibly 6 dice that have gone out of the game. That's 6 customers that have gone out of the game. It's like there's no point in even thinking until your turn comes around, and then you're like, oh, okay, now what can I do? And then you have to just sit, like Tiff said, and just reanalyze everything because there's nothing you can do in the meantime. And that's kind of why I like it at the lower player count, to be honest with you, because you can see what they're going to do, basically. There's, even that one game we played with Steve where everything fell his way. Like, I couldn't track him because I'm too busy looking at everything else. And I just was like, I couldn't prevent him from doing it. Like, it's a very solo experience. But I like the gameplay. I really don't like that draft.
Yeah, I think that it would work well as a 2-player game. Steve loves it at 2. You said it's good at 2. I think that it probably would be really good at 2 because it eliminates the downtime. My other small question before we move on and I ask Tiff about another game is why don't they just do it in like a regular circular turn structure? What's the benefit of the draft? Is it just to be unique?
I think we're getting to that point where people are just trying to stand out some way or another with a mechanic.
Yeah, and I was thinking about if we just played this, player to your left takes the next turn, why would it change anything?
I don't know. I'm
sure it's on the forums.
Do we know what the variant is?
I forget the specifics of it. I have it bookmarked, but again, I have no desire to play this at 4-player.
Yeah.
I really don't.
All right. I'm just puzzled because I really did I enjoyed the 3 minutes I was taking my turn were great, and then the 15 minutes I wasn't were awful, and then it was just like doing that for 2 hours. It was weird, but let's move on. Tiff, what else have you been playing?
I did finally I ordered Karuba after you both recommended it, so I could say that I can see why so many people are digging it. It's so simple to explain. That's the big thing for kids games, family games, is just being able to get the gameplay started as quickly as possible, and it's pretty easy. And even if there is a little bit of confusion over how it's going to work, like one turn in, you're good to go. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was hard for the people I was playing with to kind of realize that it's just this puzzle that you're doing on your own, and what the other players are doing it's not really, like, you're not worried about that as much. So that was a little bit, we discussed that a little bit, but otherwise I really liked it, and I plan on bringing it to Board Game Club this week and see what the kids like.
I hope our kids like it. I think it'll be a perfect fit for some of those kids looking for a little bit more in terms of gameplay.
Yeah, I could easily see them loving this one, and like I said, I'm always looking for something that can be taught quickly. That's the big thing, because we only have an hour, so whatever we're playing has to be teachable and playable within that hour. So this is easily done. So set it up
for them and flip a tile and say, do you want to put that on your path or do you want to throw it away?
Exactly. So no regrets on buying that one.
Awesome. Dan, anything else good get to your table?
I had a chance to play Dark Moon.
Oh, really?
Oh, boy.
Where were you doing all this?
I did this with a couple of my friends up in Bel Air.
You play weird games with your friends in Bel Air.
I get roped into weird games with my friends in Bel Air. I don't.
I was going to say, it doesn't seem like a Dan game at all.
It's not. And yeah. So Dark Moon, the BSG Express remake, it's supposed to take everything you know and love about BSG and kind of whittle it down into a 60-minute experience. I'll just say this game was 7 players, and it took 2+ hours, but
7
all
players.
new
Oh.
people. So I understand how it could go a little quicker, but it's just, again, it's one of those games. The way they do it is they have like everyone has their own dice, and dice do certain things. They have negative and positive values on those dice, and you roll them in secret behind your player screen, and then when you're doing like a vote or you're pretending to fix the ship or actually fixing the ship, like you can put out, if you put out a positive number, you succeed, but if you put out a negative number, whatever's happening does not succeed, or it makes it harder to succeed. But because you're rolling these dice in secret, you can kind of, if you are one of the quote infected people, you can, I could roll +3, +4, -2, and go, oh man, I don't have any positives, and put out that -2. So it was an interesting concept. I'm gonna start out by saying right now, the production quality was kind of crap. I don't know why this was a $60 game.
That's
Very,
what Tiff said when she first got it, right?
very
That's
thin
why I
and
traded it.
wonky player screens. The dice were wooden, and the pips were the numbers were actually the paint was coming out of them. Some people like the art. I find it a bit. I didn't really care for it.
It's kind of nondescript space art.
Yeah, it is. It's very generic. That's what I would say. It's like, here is a dial, and like it's like, I don't get it. But gameplay wise, yeah, I think it was all right.
Now, are you a fan of regular BSG?
We've had this discussion, I think, what was it, probably like 20 episodes ago, and my first play of BSG was tainted, in my opinion. And no person's fault, but I think it was mainly the game, just like the way the deck was stacked in our, towards one side or the other, and just a lot of the events didn't take place that I think make BSG interesting and tense. I think.
Yeah,
so.
nothing
Go back
happened.
and listen to our discussion. I forget what episode it is, but we had a really long discussion on it, and those were my initial thoughts. But I like the premise. I kind of like the trader mechanic is kind of hit or miss for me. I like it in some implementations better than others, and this one I thought was decent. With a 7-player game, you're playing with 4 good people and 3 infected. And it's just a whole game about sitting around accusing people. So that, to me, gets kind of boring after a while. It's funny for the first, 30 minutes, and then after that, it's like, really? I got to defend myself one way or the other. I Freudian slipped. I was actually infected, and people caught that. Because my one gripe about the game as a first-time player was, you can become... You are either infected or unaffected. That's, your status. Then you can also be fatigued or unfatigued. You can be quarantined or not quarantined. So there's all these keyword labels that you can be placed with. And I slipped once, and I was like, I'm not infected, fatigued. I was just like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I was just like, stop this. I was getting kind of bored towards the end, but it had a pretty epic finish. The infected people, myself included, won because you can reveal at any time, and unlike BSG, you can really, it seems like you can do a lot more damage to the uninfected people than you can in BSG with being a Cylon. But yeah, it was okay. I don't want it. I would play it maybe again. Maybe.
Do you think it captures BSG in that express way?
I think it definitely captures the whole finger pointing aspect of BSG. You're a Cylon. No, you're a Cylon. And the whole secretive, I thought the dice mechanic was cool. How you're you can roll them in secret, and oh, I had +4, +4, -2, and then if I'm good, I put out the +4, but if I'm bad, I put out the -2 and say I didn't have any, because
Right.
no one's any wiser. So I thought that was interesting. Unless you're a bad guy, and the first time ever I roll all positive numbers, and I'm like, oh, here you go, guys, +4 to your cause. And I'm like, yeah, look at me, I'm good. And you have to play that off. I don't know. For me, these trader games, especially when I'm the trader, pacing I just don't pick up on. I'm like, when should I reveal? How should I do this? Should I keep them hanging on longer? I just haven't come to grips with how I need to play the game in a bad way, I guess. Maybe it's just because I'm such a good guy.
Aw.
Oh, jeez.
I have no
one
poker
reveal,
face.
You
So.
reveal when you accidentally say, I'm an infected. That's when you just decide to reveal.
But the thing was, like, I got back on my feet, and I actually convinced a couple people I wasn't. But other
Ooh.
people were just dead set on, no, he slipped. It's Freudian. I'm like, all right, whatever. But I had like the table split, and then finally they're like, if you are infected, you're playing really dumbly. And I'm like, no, actually I'm not, because like the only downside was I was rolling all positive numbers, so I had to contribute a die in some instances, and it was always positive. I couldn't have that aha moment like where I revealed and like was like, haha, negative.
Little did you know, Dan Princess Brided you the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like fun. I have the
I don't
BGG
see how you would play this. I don't know, like
with other more awkward people than myself.
Yeah.
maybe.
It
Like,
works.
this has a Spyfall vibe to it. Like, I was like, how would Tiff ever
Yeah, but there's
sit
more
down and play this?
structure there. Spyfall is just like me relying on my wits, which I can't do. Whereas this is like the dice determine some of it, and I can like lie about my dice. I can do that.
Yeah, but it's different with these types of games when people are like constantly going, you're infected, and people are just constantly pointing fingers, and it's like,
Well,
you want to crack, but you can't. Like, I don't know if you like it,
Just-
cool. I just
just
couldn't
like
picture you playing it.
Spyfall, it just depends on who I'm playing with. Like when we played that game of Spyfall at Origins, I nearly had a mental breakdown. When I play it with my camp counselors during Strings Camp, we had a blast. So it just kind of depends on if I'm feeling comfortable. I will say when I open the box for Dark Moon that it just loses something when it's not set in that BSG world. I wish they had gotten the IP.
Yeah. That's tough, though.
I think
Yeah.
I'd rather play it than Dead of Winter. I think.
That's high praise.
It's not high praise, because I would never want to play Dead of Winter voluntarily.
Like, I'd rather play this than that game that I never want to play. So I
Right,
guess
that's where I was going with that.
good. Well, one last thing before we switch gears here. Do you think that 7 players was a problem? Like, did it just work with 7 players? How did that impact? That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. When they're all first time too, it's like there was a lot of clarification, because while it's mechanically pretty simple, I think just wrapping your head around the whole again, the social aspect of it, how, like, if I did this, what impression am I giving off? So just kind of wrapping your brain around that part of the game, I think, was the toughest for everyone. And just there's a lot of different actions you could take. They're all easy, and then you get, if you are infected, like, you get a whole new set of actions. So like for me, like, I was infected, and I'm like, and you switch player screens. So the player screen with the infected has all the actions on it, but I couldn't see it. So I'm like, is it worthwhile to do it now? Like, they were all on the other side of the table, and I couldn't be like, hey, can I see that infected player screen real quick?
Yep.
So it's kind of like, again, like in Spyfall, when like you're the spy and you're like, you want to look at that card that shows you all the locations that they could be talking about, but so that's my only.
Shadows over a lot when you want to, like,
you gotta, like,
have
pause
to,
and be like, everyone, look at your card again, just so, like, people, like, you know what I mean, like,
exactly.
there's no awkward, like, it was
It is tough. Everyone has to be equally informed.
Ugh.
All right. Well, do we want to quickly talk about Mombasa, or do we want to talk about how awesome Valeria Card Kingdom still is?
We talked about Mombasa last episode.
No, we didn't.
Pretty sure you did, because I remember the mom beating you story.
No, I mentioned it when you mentioned Top of the Stack, but we didn't actually talk about the game.
Oh. Okay.
You played it.
How are we doing on the time?
We're a half hour in.
Okay.
We can move forward.
Let's
Tiff,
do that.
you got some intro or some interlude music?
I do. Hold on.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about gaming pet peeves. Ooh. All right, we are back, and it is time for a little bit of discussion. We board gamers are particular people sometimes, And, I mean, everyone's got pet peeves, but let's talk about some of our pet peeves from the board gaming hobby. Now, Dan, this was your idea. So I'm going to kick it to you first. Do you have any other description to add to that, or do you just want to jump right in?
No, I think like you said, like we all have these pet peeves, whether we know it or not, like certain things that we love or hate about, aspects of games or mannerisms of the people we're playing with or mannerisms of ourselves, like almost like you could even like have some superstitions or things like that. So I thought it'd just be interesting to kind of like analyze ourselves a little bit, maybe some some of the things. This could probably be a two-part discussion because I think there's a lot that could be said for a lot of different things, but I thought it'd just be funny to see what we had to say.
All right, let's do it, Dan. What is your first gaming pet peeve?
I'm going to start off with a silly one because this one always irritates me, and it shouldn't, and it really is the most harmless thing in the world. But when I'm reading a rule book, and the first line I read in the setup, which is usually like the first or second page after components, is place the game board in the center of the table. And I always sit there and I just look at it. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, first off, like, why do they need to tell me that? And then I'm like, who doesn't place it in the center of the table? Like, it's like, what? Is there like some rebel out there that's like, no, this is going slightly skewed on the left? Like, it's like,
well, where do I put my pieces? There's no board. Oh, yeah. Wait.
It's in the center. It's just like your North Star. It's like, just in case you're looking down at your phone and when you look back up, the board is in the center. Do not worry. Like, follow the board to your promised land.
Put the board equidistance. Make sure everyone's comfortable with how close they are to the board.
It just makes me laugh because it's so specific and like place the game board in the center of the table. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing that. I'm putting it slightly off, and I'm going to put it maybe a little bit more to the south. Like,
it's one of those things. It's like a CYA for those particular nitpicky people who are like, you didn't tell me to put the game on the table.
I could never game with anybody who said, why isn't the board in the center of the table? Like, that was just, I would be like, no, we're done here. We're done here. I'm going to play Dead of Winter.
Like, they need to put, like, punch out the tokens. You're like, oh, I didn't know. I thought we just played with these sheets of money. I wasn't aware I was supposed to punch them out and hand them to people. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Prior to the game, I opened the pack of cards. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know how to deal them out. They're still in plastic. No one told me to open it.
Yeah. You want to shuffle these? I don't know. You didn't open them. Like,
yeah.
Who knows?
Well, anyway, although Pandemic Legacy, you have to be very careful. Don't open things that they don't tell you to.
Yeah,
or open them
legacy game. Yeah, I've seen that. That makes sense. But I don't know. Put the board in the center of the table, people, so they don't have to write it in the book.
Tiff. Pet peeves.
This is hard for me because when I thought about all of this, most of my pet peeves are things that other people do that annoy me during the course of gaming. So I just apologize in advance to all of my friends who I'm talking about right now.
Dish it, Tiff.
Well, okay, so
here's... put names up on the screen for everyone to see? Maybe contact information?
Well, that's what I mean. It's kind of like some of these things are going to be, people are going to know it's them. And don't feel bad. I know that that's just you, and I'm sure there are things that I do that annoy you. So it's fine. I just realize that this is a peeve of mine, is the people that constantly shuffle their hand. I can't stand that. And
like a Magic player does? Like all
yes.
The time?
Yeah. And they are usually Magic players. They just constantly are shuffling their hand, and especially when it's my game, I'm like, you're putting wear and tear on my cards unnecessarily. Like, being that collector type, I'm like, ugh, especially if they're black border cards. Oh, I don't sleeve, and I tell people that, like, I don't sleeve, so wash your hands and don't over shuffle. Like, I don't care how you're shuffling my game to get started. Like, if I ask you to shuffle a deck, go ahead and riffle shuffle the crap out of it. But don't sit there and shuffle your hand for 2 hours. Just drives me nuts.
Tiff brings a wash basin to the side of the table. So everybody, rinse, and now
hand sanitizer.
Hey, that's
lotion.
That's one of our board game club rules. They have to go down and wash their hands before they can play.
That's fair.
Well, are your friends that you play with on game night sticky too?
Listen, guys. I don't know. They're all kids at heart. Who knows?
And if so, who are they, Tiff?
I'll put a list of names in the show notes.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to build off of that, and I'm going to quickly touch on something, and then I'm going to go to the chat, because we have a question in the chat room. Building off of cards, this is something that, a gaming pet peeve of mine that's hard to enforce. I like to ask people how I should shuffle their cards, because depending on the deck and depending on the type of cards, I shuffle different ways. For instance, a game like Chimera, which you need to shuffle every hand, and that the cards are nice, I go ahead, riffle shuffle them, do whatever you got to do. But a game that doesn't have sleeves on it, or a game where there's only like 10 cards, just go ahead and pile shuffle them, real nice like that. I like to ask and be asked, can I just shuffle these however, or do whatever I want, or I don't like when people just grab cards and they're like, bridge shuffle, look at me do magic tricks with the cards, and I can do whatever I want. And I'm like, great, now they're all bent. And building off of that, Ben used to have a habit, and I'm going to pick on Ben for a minute, and Dan knows about this. Ben used to have a habit of putting down cards by bending the corner.
That's my next pet peeve.
He would snap the corner down. Not bad, but
Cal does it too.
Yeah, oh god, it's awful. It's awful. Go ahead, Dan. Talk about it because I can't handle it.
No, I mean, Ben, I love you. Cal, I love you too. You'll soon be in the family. But yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people are playing cards, they like put it down and then they like bend it and place it down. I'm like, oh my god, my card. Oh my god, my card.
Okay. And you can see it like as it bows back down slowly, and you're like, it's screaming.
And then as it sits on the board, it's doing this like seesaw banana thing because it's like in the shape of a canoe now, and you're like, oh my god. And you're like sitting there, and like I'm like scratching my legs, like the skin is coming off. I'm like, oh my god, my game.
Oh god, it's so bad. Yeah, Ben doesn't do that anymore. I'll have to have a talk with Cal. We're not married yet, so I need to make sure that that's a thing before we commit forever. I need to. Can you demonstrate shuffling and placing these cards on this board correctly before we do this?
Put it in the vows.
So
I forgot we could show people. Like, when people put a card down like this, they're like,
"Oh no, don't demonstrate."
I'm like, no, it hurts. Oh god, no, step away from the card, sir.
Ben's lucky he got invited back to game night. So Robert Johnson asked, he asked a question that kind of hits on peeves, and I might actually build off this with one of my peeves. He said, do you ever feel bad when you don't understand a new game, or are you annoyed the game isn't understandable? So does that hit any notes for anybody? Because I have a way that I can build off of that.
I mean, let's just use Matt as an example, and then I'll use myself as an example.
Oh no.
So Matt, whenever he makes a bad move in a first play, he always goes, learning, and we all know he does it, and we all know it's a learning game, so we just laugh at it. He does that. Me, I do something similar, except I'm just like, oh, well, I get this, because for me, like a first play, like I'm not looking to win it. I'm looking to see how the systems are playing on each other and working and interconnecting, and I'm not the type of player who can pick up on that right away. And our buddy Smee is, and you'll see, and he'll be the first to admit it, he will win a first play like 75% of the time and lose the second play 75% of the time because the rest of us just take that first play to kind of let it simmer and click and all those things. But I always laugh because when I do something like that, Matt goes, oh god, he's going to use this as an excuse. And Matt goes, learning, and we're all like, oh, that's Matt's excuse. So we all do it. It's just one of those things.
True. It's true.
As much as you don't want to lose, like I'm much more okay losing in one of those kinds of games.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Tiff, any feelings on that?
Well, the only time I really feel bad about that is at conventions. And this will tie into one of my pet peeves later, but sometimes I have a hard time following rules because I'm sleep deprived or
Yeah.
there's a lot going on, so I get distracted and I miss something. Now, normally after the rule explanation is over at a con, if you're gaming with me, this will happen. I will be like, "Can I see that rule book?" Because I have to go back and find the things that I missed because I
I
will
hate
miss
those
things.
words.
Yeah, it's not to check. In my case, it's not to check rules because I hate that too.
Yeah.
But it's because I know I missed something and I'm embarrassed to ask you to repeat it because I don't want to make you do
I
that.
gotcha.
So I do feel bad because that happens a lot to me at conventions. Now in my normal game group, it's not usually a problem. But yeah.
Well, so to build off of that, one of the things that I dislike, and this is a pet peeve of mine, I've got this written down, and Tiff actually just reminded me of another one. Man, I'm feeling whiny today.
So I said this could be like a two-part conversation.
Yeah. One of my pet peeves is when a player checks out in the middle of my rules description and then gets upset that they missed something during the game.
Amen, brother.
So-
Preach it.
Someone's on their phone, and this particularly happens with Dan's always on his phone. Biff and Kel don't like long rules explanations. You get about 2.5, 3 minutes with them, and if you haven't explained the game, they're gone. Biff, in particular, starts saying, "Can we just start the game, guys?" And I have to say, I would love to, but if I don't explain this to you, in 20 minutes you're going to yell at me because you didn't know how to do that or that you could do that. And that's what drives me insane is that I'm taking my time, I'm being careful to help you through this game. You're mad at me because it's taking too long. And then in the middle of the game, you're like, "I don't like this game because I didn't know I could do that." Well, if you listen to my rules explanation... Anyway, sorry. I'm going to take a breath.
Well, my next one has to do with rules explanations too. So.
Go for it, Tiff. Build right off of it.
So this happens a lot in my middle school board game club because middle schoolers are intensely impatient, and because I'm a teacher, I really have a huge aversion to being interrupted because I never get to complete a full sentence. Like, that's never happening in my lifetime. So I hate people that interrupt rules explanations. And the answer is always, "I'm getting there."
Yeah.
Just
Or I'll show you that in a
assume.
second.
Like, if I'm like wrapping up and I'm like, "And that's the game," then you can say, "Well, what about this?" But if I'm like mid-sentence in a rule explanation, I'm probably going to explain it if you have a question about it. Like, have a little faith. And the same thing with my students. Like, have a little faith. Have I ever not explained the full thing to you? Anyway, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's like, please hold your questions to the end. All questions are valid, but give me a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. All right, Dan, anything else on your list?
I got one more. Well, I got a few more, but I'm gonna use this one.
Okay.
I really hate when markers in the game, so cubes, discs, anything like that, don't fit their assigned space on a track or a place on the board. Like, it just annoys me beyond belief. It's like, yeah, so you put so let's take Grand Austria Hotel because we just talked about that. They give you a giant disc to put on your square money track, and it covers like the money you're on as well as like half of the two on either side of it, and you can't see it all the time. Things like that. So it's like, just a little bit more thought in the size of the pieces on, especially like score tracks too. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, I love Takedo, but man, I remember those tiny little pieces you had to move on that score track.
The little tiny circles.
Yeah, they were smaller than the Tic Tacs.
Well, you guys saw my tweet about Flock, right? Did you see the score track for
that
Flock?
Was,
you have, for the listeners, you have little bird-shaped tokens that you're putting on tiny squares that are smaller than those birds. So it's a mess, and it's impossible to tell where you are score-wise. So you're not invested in the game at all because you have no idea where you're at.
Oh, man. How you guys liking the game? I don't know. I don't know how well I'm doing.
That's exactly how I felt. You're going to have a problem with Eeky, too. It has a little bit of that going on.
Oh, yeah.
It's just one of those things. Like, and then other games do it so well. It's like every little bit has a perfectly sized place for it, and some of them are like overly OCD, which for me it's awesome because I'm the type of guy who like rearranges his pieces and
Yeah.
has to have them in perfect order, and my trains all have to line up. You know what I mean? Like face the right direction. Like I can't have one train going to Chicago and one going down to Texas. Like that's not going to work. Like that's not real. Trains don't operate that way.
No, Dan, how did you feel about Mombasa, which went above and beyond and has coins which are the same thing in two different shapes to fit the two different types of spaces
Mombasa
that they
was
go
funny.
on?
That was silly. Like I didn't understand it because the coins that go on the book space were giant, and then the coins in the game for the same value were regular coin size.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they didn't just shrink the spaces on the book area to a regular coin size. Like I don't understand that decision, but
Yeah,
um, I don't know.
you look at your money pool and you're like, wait, are these worth more?
Yeah, it was confusing because you're thinking like subliminally when you play a board game, typically, if there's multiple denominations of currency, they're different sizes for either colorblind people or just people who like to fiddle with their pieces and want to just look down.
Uh-oh.
Dan, I think we lost your audio. Take a breath.
My audio or Dan's?
I hear Tiff. I don't hear Dan.
Okay, something happened with Dan. That's
Dan
all right.
can't hear us because he's talking.
I'll text him and let him know that we lost.
Okay.
Or no, his laptop just died, so.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a brief break, Tiff.
Yes.
Pause the live feed, and we will be back with our Keep Trade Burn and the end of the episode.
So stop broadcast. Where is that?